The first crack of splintering wood wasn't thunder. It wasn't wind. It was the sound of my ranch fence giving way under the deliberate force of Karen's shiny SUV. For weeks, this woman, this self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had been waging her petty war against me. She didn't like that my ranch, a piece of land passed down from my grandfather, bordered their pristine suburban development. She said my fence ruined the aesthetic. She filed complaints about the sound of my cattle, the smell of hay, even the way my truck looked parked near the road. But that morning, she crossed a line. She rammed her vehicle into the old cedar fence, laughed loud enough for me to hear across the field, and shouted, "Now maybe you'll finally sell this dump." Before driving off, I stood there, fists clenched, watching my livestock scatter through the gap she'd left. That fence wasn't just wood and nails, it was blood, sweat, and the last piece of my father's handiwork still standing. For a moment, I felt helpless. But then, as I looked across the pasture, I remembered the herd grazing in the back field. 200 head of bison, massive and wild, bred on this land for generations. Stronger than any cow, smarter than any horse, and not afraid to push back when provoked. A slow, burning idea began to take root in my mind. Karen had her rules. Karen had her power trips. But I had something she could never control. That night, I unlatched the back gates. With a whistle and a crack of grain buckets, the bison followed me, curious, restless. I guided them down the service road, right toward the HOA's immaculate little headquarters, a glass-fronted office in the heart of their subdivision. It was midnight when I pulled the chains off the last gate. The herd surged forward like a rolling storm. The first sound was the crash of horns against glass. Windows shattered. Alarms blared. The herd poured inside, tearing up fake plants, knocking over filing cabinets, stomping across polished tile with a thunder that shook the walls. HOA pamphlets, contracts, and fine notices flew into the air like confetti. By the time Karen and her board arrived, still in their pajamas, the office was an unrecognizable ruin. She screamed, high-pitched and furious, but it was drowned out by the guttural bellows of the herd. One particularly massive bull stood inches from her, snorting steam onto her face as if daring her to say another word. For the first time since she'd set her sights on me, Karen looked small. Powerless. I stood leaning against my truck in the parking lot, arms crossed, watching her world collapse the same way she'd tried to collapse mine. She caught my eye, trembling with rage and fear. I just tipped my hat. By morning, the herd had calmed and wandered back toward my ranch, leaving behind nothing but hoofprints, broken furniture, and the shattered pride of an HOA that thought they could bully a man off his land. Karen tried to press charges, of course. But the sheriff, an old friend who'd grown up eating my family's bison steaks, just shook his head and said, "Well, Karen, maybe if you hadn't destroyed his fence, his herd wouldn't have wandered. Looks like you brought this one on yourself." The HOA office was condemned for repairs. Karen's precious power meetings were forced into the backroom of a strip mall nail salon. My fence, rebuilt stronger than ever, courtesy of a settlement check the HOA had to cut to keep the matter quiet. And every time I see those bison out in the pasture, I remember the night justice thundered through the heart of that HOA, hooves, horns, and all.